Hi, I'm David Lozada. Welcome to Project Move, Rappler's series of regular discussions on promoting foresight and safety and fostering a culture of preparedness. Unlike other natural hazards, earthquakes do not come with warnings. While the potential vulnerability of areas can be determined, there are no indications when an earthquake will strike. On March 27, the Office of Civil Defense will be holding the nationwide simultaneous earthquake drill. This aims to prepare the public in case an earthquake hits. Today, we have experts who will talk about the real-life perils of geohazards and how the public can prepare for such disasters. We have Dr. Renato Solidum, Director of the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, and Mr. Martin Aguda, a safety and disaster expert from Orange Helmets. So, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Okay.
David?
So let's discuss about let's talk about earthquakes. Yun nga, how do we prepare for earthquakes, or how important is preparedness during earthquakes? Because unlike typhoons, like you know the path or you know when it will hit, but earthquakes, they don't have these things.
Well, yes, as what you said, earthquakes are kind of different from typhoons when it comes to preparedness. Typhoons can be forecasted, so you can see the birth of a weather-related system like a typhoon before it hits our country. However, earthquakes would suddenly occur. We know where the earthquake generators are, so we definitely say that the Philippines can be affected by a strong earthquake, but when this will happen and where exactly this would happen may be difficult. However, we can also anticipate the strength of the earthquake shaking that can happen in a particular area, and that is well studied for the whole country. Only Palawan Island cannot be shaken by a strong earthquake. They may feel an earthquake, but not very strong. The rest of the Philippines has been affected by earthquakes in the past and can be affected again in the future. Therefore, we need to anticipate that a strong earthquake can happen. So the problem is we don't know exactly when, but let's assume that any parts of the Philippines minus Palawan Island can be shaken strongly. Therefore, earthquake preparedness must be seen at various perspectives. What would kill people would be buildings that collapse, slopes that would tumble down, landslide, or the waves that would encroach coastal areas. Another hazard that we must think of would be during the actual shaking and after it, fire can happen.
Okay.
So definitely the earthquake would bring in multiple hazards, and when it comes to making sure that we are prepared for it, we must first make sure that houses and buildings are built according to appropriate design and using the right materials. Second, settlement, location of houses and critical infrastructure must be in an area which is not highly susceptible to various hazards. Or if highly susceptible like ground shaking, we can mitigate this through appropriate building. So building and location safety would be the first. Second is, during the actual earthquake, we need to know what to do during the shaking itself. That is why we recommend the phrase drop, cover, and hold, or duck, cover, and hold. Meaning, if there is a study table, you hide beneath it, and you hold either the legs or the edge of the table so that the table will not move away from you, so that you won't lose cover. If there is no sturdy table, you just position yourself in an area that is safer, away from things that might fall down, away from things that might break, and you cover your head and nape with your hands. You either squat or kneel. And then after the earthquake, you move to a safer area, and usually that would be outside of the building. After the earthquake, you also need to prepare in advance how to respond to it.
Yes.
So preparing the site, preparing the building, the infrastructure, preparing the people, and preparing those who would respond. Okay, so there are many aspects, and I just mentioned a few.
Okay. In terms of preparedness with the current system, how prepared are the government agencies and the public in case an earthquake hits, like Metro Manila or other parts of the country?
That question, how prepared are we, is a very simple question, but a very hard question to answer, because, as I mentioned earlier, you have to look at it from different perspectives. If you think of people's safety, I think we have been increasing our awareness and preparedness campaigns. That's why we encourage all people to participate in the next big event, the nationwide simultaneous earthquake drill. That's March 27 at 9 a.m. But we need to continue this. We also need to look at building safety. When it comes to building safety, based on our studies in 2004 and 2013, we see the problem of non-engineered buildings being affected by a strong earthquake here in Metro Manila, and even small-rise to mid-rise buildings can be affected. And that is only in Metro Manila. Okay, how about the rest of the country? So therefore, building safety, we need to further improve ourselves. Preparing to respond, making sure that we have enough rescuers, we have enough people locally that can help a devastated area, must be increased. Of course, we also rely on outsiders outside of the Philippines to help us, but they also need to have simulation exercises on how they will interact with each other. Because most often they cannot understand each other, so they have to practice the symbols for response. Now, I think that the main issue now is how to make this fast. Okay, and for me, I have a suggestion that can take advantage of the school system. Schools would usually give assignments to students. Why not give an assignment to students where they prepare an evacuation plan together with their family? Draw the outline of their houses and the community. Select the places inside the house where they are supposed to do the drop, cover, and hold. And then select an evacuation area consistent with the plan of the community. Submit this back to the teachers, they evaluate it, give it back to the student for comments. I think this will encourage more people to prepare. Because what we are doing now is teaching the kids on what to do, teaching employees on what to do, but really making sure that they know what to do at home, or we also need to look at that.
So the disaster imagination.
Disaster imagination is very important.
But there seems to be a misconception because when we talk about the fault line, for example, the West Valley Fault, people think that they're only vulnerable when they're located along the fault line.
That is not totally correct.
Yes.
Let me cite an earthquake in 1968, which occurred to the north of Metro Manila. And that is the Kasiguran earthquake of 1968, magnitude 7.3. The epicenter was in Kasiguran, Aurora, 200 plus kilometers north of Manila. And a building called Ruby Tower collapsed. And that is 200 kilometers away from us. The fault that moved was 200 kilometers away. So the major hazard really is the ground shaking. Okay, as long as we don't put our house on top of the fault, which can rupture the ground, which can displace the building, the very important hazard, which is taken into account by our building code, would be the ground shaking. Because ground shaking can cause the collapse of buildings. Ground shaking can cause liquefaction. Ground shaking can cause landslides. Ground shaking can cause fire. So all of those can really devastate an area. And so the misconception that if we are a little bit far from the fault, we're okay, is not correct. That is why we always stress the importance of preparing our house, preparing ourselves, and preparing our communities. Not only communities which are near the fault, but also away.
Let's talking about preparedness, Mr. Martin. What are the some practical tips on how people can prepare for earthquakes?
There's this popular 72 hours preparedness. 72 hours is 3 days. This is in practice in the US. For 3 days, the families, individuals should be self-contained, meaning they should not expect rescuers, right, to be on their doorstep conducting search and rescue operations. So that's the basic principle in preparing. And in the Philippines, maybe we could modify a little bit by preparing. If you can prepare for longer period, like not only 3 days. I suggest not only for earthquakes but for typhoons and other disasters, at least minimum of 1 week. If we can afford to be self-contained, meaning you have water, you have food, you have essential supplies, and other emergency tools for your survival. That's very critical now when we encourage people to prepare. And apart from that, is preparing to respond. we call it immediate action drills. Like, what do you do in case of an earthquake, as Director Solido mentioned? So, duck, cover, and hold. What do you do in case of fire? Okay,
Yes.
call for, send the alarm and evacuate. What do you in case your clothes catches fire? So, these are called immediate action drills, and these should be taught to everyone. And I would say that the initiative of starting teaching the children first, and maybe that the student can teach their parents. Reverse engineering.
Because we're catching up.
Yeah, the older generation actually are catching up. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because I cannot recall an earthquake drill. I studied in a private school during my elementary and high school days. I cannot recall any earthquake or fire drill in my earlier school days. So there's a big difference right now with DRR, disaster risk reduction programs, being implemented in schools, in private institutions. I guess we've done a lot, but there's so many things to be done still.
In terms of responders, I think you have an initiative going on, like, to prepare them for an earthquake.
Well, I'm a trained collapse structure search and rescue. You call that CSSR. That's a specialized rescue discipline for collapse structures, because our rescue disciplines are specialized. For CSSR, you will need certain techniques, like how do you identify that in a particular building you still have live patients, live victims. No? So there's the so-called hailing technique, and now you can utilize the technology, like what do you call that sensing device? It's a high-tech microphone that can hear sounds. And following will be the how to breach collapse structures. There's a specific technique on breaching structures so as not to cause further harm to the victims. We call that CSSR. And most of the rescuers in Metro Manila, in preparation for the 7.2 magnitude earthquake, have been conducting drills. And in fact, during the Fire Prevention Month in March, we would always see fire trucks doing their parades. I have a concept. What if we ask our rescuers to just walk with their equipment and rig with their personal gadgets in rescue uniform?
Earthquakes, you can't really pass by roads.
With that premise that during earthquakes, most of the roads will be not accessible. Okay? So we have to walk going to our target area or ground zero. So last year, we initiated an event. It's called the Rescue March Challenge. 500 rescuers assembled at the Bonifacio Global City, and we took C5. Okay? We took C5 and we ended at the Quezon City Circle. It's approximately 17 kilometers. And there were lots of realization for individual rescuers that it's not easy to walk with your gear. It's easy to walk like 10 kilometers. So running is very popular now. But it's different when you are in your rescue gears and other equipment that you will have to bring along during your rescue operation. So this year, we're doing it again. Now, from Quezon City Circle, we're going to Manila City. That's approximately 10 to 12 kilometers walk. In this way, we can test not only the operational capability, because I think during the drills the operational capabilities are being tested, but we must remember that during earthquakes, rescue operation, unlike a fire operation, would last for hours. In earthquake rescue operation, it can be days and weeks. You cannot rely on your adrenaline rush factor, no, for you to survive a prolonged rescue operation. So I would like to emphasize rescuers should have adequate physical fitness, endurance, and the rest. And with this exercise, it's not competitive, David. It's just a walk, but at the same time, it's also a chance to network with other rescue groups, because we're inviting the national responders from the AFP, from OCD, from the local DRR units, rescue teams, the private sectors, and the volunteers. No? So with this camaraderie challenge, maybe this will be a good opportunity since it's non-competitive. There will be no prize. Hindi po unahan to. We can mingle around, and the heads of our response agencies will be there also.
We have all these preparations, and we always talk about the big one, like MMIers. Do people really understand what we're talking about? So can you, sir, briefly explain, like, what is this 7.2 magnitude that we're talking about?
For any city, for any place here in the Philippines or in other countries, if you want to prepare for a specific hazard, whether it's an earthquake or typhoon, you need to anticipate the various scenarios that can cause severe impact to that particular city. So for earthquakes, in Metro Manila, we studied 18 earthquake scenarios. Some would be generated offshore, some would be generated inland from various faults in Luzon. But there is one fault that we need to look at because it traverses the eastern side of Metro Manila and parts of Bulacan, Rizal, Cavite, and Laguna. That would be the Valley Fault system, in particular, the western trace of it, called the West Valley Fault. For that fault, we studied it, and we think that it is capable of generating a magnitude 7.2 earthquake based on its length and based on historical events. Our study would also indicate that in the past 1,400 years, this fault has moved 4 times with a rough interval of 400 to 600 years on the average. If we use the 400 year as the lower limit of movement, interval of movement, and if we trace back when the last earthquake happened from the Valley Fault system, that occurred in 1658, around 357 years ago. If you compare these two numbers, 357 and 400, then we can say that's close. We don't need to wait for like 40 plus years.
Yes.
It may come earlier, but also it may come later. But that fault can generate an earthquake, which can happen in our lifetime. And if we assume that that can happen in our lifetime, that must impress on us that we need to prepare for it. An earthquake can also happen from other faults that can also shake Metro Manila, but not as severely. So if we prepare for these bigger earthquakes, then we prepare for the smaller events better. So for Metro Manila, that is our scenario. But our scenario would be different in other places of the Philippines. So in particular, I don't personally use the words big one because that particular earthquake, which will be big for a city of like Manila, will be different. Maybe higher in other places or a little bit lower. But, okay, this is not a prediction because a prediction tells you exactly when it will happen at only the magnitude and the place. So this is a scenario for preparedness. And if this 7.2 earthquake happens, and its depth is shallow, like 5 kilometers, then it can cause intensity 8 ground shaking here in Metro Manila, parts of Bulacan, Rizal, Cavite, and Laguna. And intensity 8 shaking is a very destructive shaking. And if when that happens, the shaking would cause movement of buildings, and even if you're on the first floor or ground surface, you may not be able to stand. And that's the feeling of a strong shaking, that's intensity 8. And that can cause a devastation of significant numbers of buildings. For example, in our 2004 study with MMBA and JICA, we found out that roughly 13% of the low-rise buildings will suffer heavy damage or collapse. Same as public buildings, 10%. Mid-rise buildings, 8 to 11%. So, essentially, low-rise buildings can be severely affected by an earthquake coming from the West Valley Fault. The high-rises, like more than 30 stories, around 2% heavily damaged. Okay? And so, this also counters the traditional impression by people that the higher the building, the more dangerous it is, right? No, essentially, if we look at the West Valley Fault, when it moves, the first thing that we will feel will be the up and down motion. We're being pushed from below. If we just feel a horizontal shaking, then the epicenter is not from that fault. It's a little bit further away. Better news. However, after the vertical motion, then the next series of shaking will be horizontal or variations of it. And the variation will be kind of fast, okay? And that would have the tendency of moving lighter structures. Since the low-rise buildings and mid-rise buildings are that height, then their weight is light. Compared to very tall buildings, their weight is heavy. So they will be moved more than the tall buildings. And if these buildings are not properly constructed and designed, then they can suffer heavily damage or collapse. Second, we're very strict on high-rise buildings. And if you're the owner of the high-rise buildings, you spend more money, you get top-notch engineers and consultants, even abroad, right? So preparedness now must focus into mid-rise and especially low-rise buildings. Maybe in urban areas, there are mid-rise buildings, aside from low-rise buildings, but in some other cities, it's mainly low-rise buildings. And low-rise buildings are the most vulnerable to earthquake effects when the epicenter is very near, especially because a part of the low-rise buildings are what we call non-engineered buildings. These were constructed without the guidance of licensed civil engineers and architects. And so, we need to convince the local governments, or the local governments must first check the building safety, the house safety. Okay? Especially buildings that people mass, schools, hospitals, malls, churches. Right? So they need to inspect this, because even if we prepare and do the drop, cover, and hold, we are assuming that the building will not totally collapse. That's the assumption for all drills all over the world. But if the building will pancake, then that's a different
story.
thing, a different story. So drills should also be premised on the fact that these buildings can withstand a strong shaking and might not totally collapse. But if this will totally collapse, then they must be abandoned or condemned.
Director Solidum, what does the building code say about construction of buildings in terms of resistance to earthquakes?
Okay, they can resist intensity 8 to 9 earthquake.
Intensity 8 or 9?
Yeah, because maybe some people might say, oh, can we really do that? Well, there is proof. The 1990 Luzon earthquake, which affected Luzon, and the foremost city that we can remember would be Baguio City, there were more buildings that were left standing than buildings that collapsed. And the intensity there is intensity 8. 2012 Negros earthquake, intensity 8. Buildings, houses suffered damage, but there were more that were left standing. Whole earthquake the same, right? So we can actually do this. Intensity 8 is a minimum shaking that we can build for earthquake resilience.
So the building code works. It's just a
The
matter
building
of
code works.
implementation.
It's a matter of implementation. Now, the other thing is, I go back to the phrase that you mentioned, disaster imagination, which I have been trying to advocate to be used, because if you look at Filipinos, we usually prepare for typhoons. Because these are frequent. Floods, landslide. Earthquakes are not so common, so we tend to forget earthquake preparedness. But the real problem, I think, why we don't respond to a specific disaster, whether it's an earthquake or like typhoons or storm surges or tsunamis, that some people don't have the proper appreciation of what can happen to them, especially what can happen to their houses. So we developed a tool, and I think this was also highlighted by Rappler way back in 2013, that can help ordinary people appreciate the resilience of their houses. 1 to 2 story concrete hollow block houses, and that tool is a questionnaire tool that you can find out if the house is safe or not for an earthquake, and whether you really need to consult an engineer right away.
Okay. Sir Martin, how about local government units? Like, because a big part of the implementation, for example, of the building code relies on the local government unit. How prepared do you can you say are the local government units in terms of responding to earthquakes? In terms of response.
Well, in terms of response, there are lots of since we have the DRR law, and independently the local government units, specifically in Metro Manila, have been, I think, doing operational readiness by procuring equipment, because when you talk of rescue, we're not talking only of to operationalize a rescue team specifically. You will still start with your disaster imagination. You have to know what things do you need to be prepared for, and that will dictate the type of rescue operational capability that you will develop in a certain LGU. For example, if you're flood prone, you will have more of your water search and rescue, or your WASAR. If you're near the fault line, and if you have high risk for building collapse during an earthquake, you would want to have your collapse structure search and rescue. So I think the operational readiness in terms of our responders and rescuers in Metro Manila have been constantly improving, while at the same time, the principle of training and equipping equals operational readiness, plus drills. And I would say that drills are part of training. You just drills are acting out your plan.
Yeah. Testing the plan.
Testing the plan, actually. And I've learned this from one of my trainings abroad, that why do you call it a drill? Okay, a drill is an electrical or mechanical device that will punch holes. In a drill, actually, you're punching holes to the plan. So you go back to the drawing board, and maybe you can do some adjustments. That's why you test your plan. So drills are very important. And this March 27, although we're doing it in Marikina, I guess other DRR of the local government units in Metro Manila will have their own activities as well.
The reason why we have these various activities for earthquake drills to test the plans is that people must imagine that if you're the house owner, your concern would be your house and your family. But if you're the mayor, you must be concerned with your residents and everything that comes in, like bridges, power supply, water. But if you're the Metro Manila chair, you're concerned with the whole Metro Manila. But if you're the national level, that earthquake can cause devastation. Not only in Metro Manila, it can be some parts of Bulacan, Rizal, Cavite, and Laguna. That will be a national problem. That's only the physical damage. Yeah. The consequence of that earthquake, economically and governance, can reach the whole country. Because Metro Manila is the seat of government, seat of business. And so people must not only look at their own safety. That earthquake can kill around 31,000 to 33,500 people. Those are the estimates of the two studies, one in 2013 and one in 2004. And so it's not only the lives that will be at stake. The cost of replacing this number of buildings that can suffer heavy damage or collapse can be like more than 2 trillion pesos. That's a very big budget amount of money. So we need to look at building safety so that we can reduce the number of people that can be affected. Yeah. That's a lot. And so the responders now would have to think of which group will have to respond to which particular geographic location. Yeah. And that is why they're doing, Martin and his team would be doing this many physical training exercises to let the responders imagine the adversity that they face.
Yeah, with this scenario of having like 35,000 casualties to 50,000, just imagine where would you bring these patients and treat them. Actually, it's not only the rescuers, but I think we need to educate the public being first responders / force multipliers. Okay? So rescue does not mean like doing technical rescue, scavenging, and breaching concretes, but doing first aid. Imagine 35,000 would be injured. Yeah. You might be in your street, in your subdivision, and people will be lying there with injuries. You might want to organize members of your community, doctors, nurses, other medical practitioners, to do first aid. You do triaging, you do treatment. So a community should be self-contained as well, actually, in responding to the emergencies and incidents that would be happening in their respective areas. And another, according to the Meyer study, there will be 500 fires.
Yeah, 500 fires.
Simultaneously occurring as a consequence of the earth shaking. So although we have lots of volunteer fire stations, our friends from the Filipino-Chinese fire brigades, and of course the Bureau of Fire Protection, the big question there is how can they respond to those fires if some of the roads will be obstructed by debris. So again, community firefighting should be initiated, like bucket relay. Okay? So timba-timba, tulong-tulong no, sa firefighting, and that should be done at the barangay level.
People must also realize that for a severe earthquake, or like what happened in Yolanda, severe typhoon, there can be isolated places simply because the roads are blocked, bridges cannot be used, or the ground has fissured because of liquefaction. The grounds can rift apart. Pero hindi ka naman mahulog, no?
Yeah.
But essentially, moving around can be difficult. So we thought of Metro Manila being at least isolated into 4 major zones. If you imagine the Pasig River running from east to west, and if bridges crossing it will not be able to, we cannot use this, then we cannot go from Makati to Quezon City and vice versa. So people must understand that they always have to be ready where they are, if in case there's an earthquake. And so therefore, their families must be oriented on what they're supposed to do, whether they're at home or anywhere, and whether they can meet somewhere else. Because it will be very difficult to communicate with one another right away. So the government's plan is to make sure that together with the resources of the private sector and military and those coming from abroad, they would have to look at which group to be assigned to specific sectors of Metro Manila. Because if we don't do that, then it will be chaotic, because we might forget the other localities, no, not being assisted. We also have to make sure that infrastructure-wise, we're ready. For example, the big bulk of the ready responders will fly in, but where will they land? And if we think that if in case NAIA cannot be used, then the next assignment will be land in Clark Air Base or Subic Base. And based on our simulation, those will not be severely affected. But the next thing is, where will the bulk of the relief goods come in? How will they come in? Usually it should be carried by the big ships. But if all our peers, either in North or South Harbor, are affected by liquefaction, because these are liquefaction prone, then where will the ships land? It will be landing somewhere in the middle of Manila Bay. Then you have to ferry it, so it will take time. We have to make sure that at least one pier in South Harbor or North Harbor is earthquake resistant. So we have to also make ready how we will receive the response, the goods from different places of the Philippines.
Okay. Siguro final thoughts regarding, because on March 27 we'll have the nationwide earthquake drill, and maybe you can invite the public, like what they can do even if they're not from Marikina, in their schools, in their houses.
Okay, maybe before we end, I'd like to discuss also the importance of family preparedness and using specific scenarios, like what Director Solidum have advocated, the disaster imagination. Actually, I have from the disaster imagination concept of Director Solidum, I developed something like you do your own disaster movie, and that the ending of that movie will be dependent on your preparation. Either you'll be a hero or you'll be a casualty. Either it will be a sad ending or a heroic ending. By using such scenarios, that emergency planning should be very specific as to the place. Nasaan ka ba? Are you in school? Are you at work? Or as to the time and as to the type of emergency. So I have a mnemonic there, PET planning. So as to the place, as to the emergency, as to the time. Emergency planning should be very specific. You know? So AM, PM, and various places, various scenarios. And with that, we would start preparing specifically what do we need? What should we have at our bedside? Okay? Like what I'm advocating, as Director Solidum are also advocating, other emergency preparedness advocates. Director Solidum will have its whistle.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Why whistle? Whistle will, if we are trapped and we need rescue, this is a very effective way of calling attention of the public and the rescuers that in this particular structure, there are live victims. Because we have to remember, and rescuers are trained to do a initial assessment of a particular place before they start to initiate rescue efforts. Because even if one building is totally collapsed and they would assess that there are no potential live victims there, they would have to transfer to another building to save more lives. So at the early onset that you are trapped in a building, you would have your whistle. And these are gadgets, in terms of preparedness, these are gadgets that should be, we call this the on-person gear. Because there are gadgets or survival gears, no? Especially for the group of the prepper groups. Okay, you have the next level, which is the near-person gear. That can be your that can be a belt bag, that can be your laptop with some survival supplies, or that can be some gadgets in your car, in your vehicle. And you have the 72 hours preparedness, a comprehensive preparedness kit for your family. Okay, so an example of an on-person gear that we always advocate is the use of whistle, as this would be very vital in your survival.
That's what I say. Be a whistleblower in a different sense.
Yeah.
and another point that preparedness should be done at various levels: government, local government, and families, and especially institutions. Like with schools, we assisted one private school, and using the concept of disaster imagination, we told the school administrators, what will you do if the children will not be fetched by their parents? Because the school is located in Quezon City, and the parents, their residence is located in Ayala, Alabang. So what will the school administration do with the children who were not fetched? Do they have enough food, and who will take care of them? Remember, the teachers will have to go home. They have their own concerns. They have their own families. So these are specific plans, okay? And some institutions thought that if they do drills, that's it. They're prepared, okay? They should go beyond conducting drills and continue to do disaster imagination to get specific preparedness planning.
Actually, one of the things that people must do, whether they're in school, offices, or houses, is to do what we call a building or house watching exercise. What you do is go to all parts of the rooms, all parts of the houses, all parts of the buildings, and imagine, is this dangerous or safe? Like some exits are blocked by boxes, right? Like in schools, you have flower pots on ledges. Those are good for for making the building beautiful, but dangerous during earthquake, because when students would pass over that area, those flower pots on the ledges can fall down and can actually kill them. So we try to do that as part of our training to teachers is, okay, look around, which should be improved, which things should be okay, and all for making sure that during an event, the area is safe, that particular area is safe.
All it really takes is imagination.
Yes,
Imagine
what can happen to that particular area when there's an event. Imagine what you can do. But if you're a national or local, provincial, regional, or local official, imagine what can happen not only in your place but beyond.
And one practical tip for those in the corporate and occupying high-rise buildings, for the ladies who are in the corporate attire with their high heels, you have to use the emergency exits, and you have to walk for kilometers because there's no public transport available. Have a sneakers standby on your workstation, so in case you have to change and you're good to go.
Okay. Any more practical tips or final word for in terms of earthquake preparedness?
Well, the thing is, we always say that you have to be calm during an earthquake event. But being calm would only be achieved if you do a lot of practice. But being calm would also mean that you understand what earthquakes are, what they can do, and more importantly, what you can do to make sure those bad things that you can imagine will not happen. So, understanding things, not only what to do, would be very important. That's why we always talk about the scenarios, talk about the hazards that the earthquakes can bring, and we talk about the solutions. I think we need to make sure that, as Martin mentioned, what you can do as an individual, prepare yourself. Be ready with the things that you need. Emergency bags that you need to have, like you have to have ready food, water, important papers, blankets, canned goods, many things, including flashlights maybe, or extra clothes. There are many things that can be done, and we need to start with it at home.
I like to say, perfect practice makes perfect. So we have to do the correct technique, like with the duck cover and hold. So we are advocating everyone to participate during the national simultaneous earthquake drill. If we can participate by doing a full exercise, like doing the duck cover and hold, evacuating, simulating some rescue scenarios, we can participate by just doing the duck cover and hold at exactly 9 o'clock,
9 a.m.
when everyone will be doing, or that's the start of the drill. Okay, maybe that's the first phase of preparedness, having this preparedness mindset in our respective offices and institutions. Drill, constant practice.
People should not think that they will not be victims, because they think others should do it but not.
That's a problem actually when we have earthquake drills, right?
Yeah.
Like not everyone takes it seriously.
Seriously. Yeah.
Well, those who take it seriously will be the people who are alive.
At the end of the movie, they'll be the heroes.
Usually the hero.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks again, and our official hashtag for the nationwide earthquake drill will be Oplan Pagdinig. And everyone is encouraged to take part in this drill by recording and sharing their own duck cover and hold videos. Actually, Sir Martin and Dr. Soledum will have their own videos, and posting them on social media. And they can also hold their drills, as you said, at 9 a.m. on March 27. So you can share your videos and photos on social media using the hashtag Oplan Pagdinig. Whether in the office, at school, at home, or outdoors, you can practice what to do in case of an earthquake. So thanks again for joining our online discussion. Join us again next week in the next episode of Project Move. I'm David Lozada, and together, let's build a culture of preparedness.